What advice would I give to militant workers in workplaces without a union? Wow. That is a tough question. This question's been posed before. When you're in a workplace without a union, it's tough, and I've been there. And I know it's almost flippant to say my advice is to get out of there and get into an area where you get into a union, trying to fight the bosses in a non-union situation. I know right now that there's a certain stage of the class struggle right now where we see a lot of wildcat strikes taking place in non-union areas, and that's great, but that's not always the rule of thumb. And to try and get yourself a union in a place right now, everything is stacked against you. Everything is stacked against you. So I'm not really sure how to answer that question, because of the difficulties involved in working in non-union shops.
Well, I think in certain non-union shops, there are some limited protections under labor law for concerted action around, say, like, for instance, a safety issue. You have certain protections. Of course, a boss can try to fire you. And frankly, I think your best protection is not, like, you can't appeal to politicians or the courts because they'll bury you in paper. But I just saw the other day, it was someone got fired in the Amazon warehouse for organizing activity, and everybody went on strike until they rehired. And that's a lesson that goes back to the 30s too, when people were victimized by GM or Ford for organizing activity. Everybody stopped work until they were rehired. They were reinstated. But for me, it's like, you try to organize where you're at. You talk to people, you do, the kind of basic things you do when you organize. You talk to people, you meet them off-site if you have to. You talk to them about what the advantages of having a union are, and you don't even have to. I think this is a lesson some of our hotel comrades have learned, is that you don't really have to have like a bureaucratic labor structure. If you want to settle a grievance with the boss, you could pack about 20 people into the boss's office and give them hell until they give in on a question. So there are things people can do collectively, and the more we act collectively, the more we learn our potential power as a class. Correct? But yeah, I mean, you're right though. It is a tough question, and a lot of people don't want to take that risk. Because you don't. It was always my thing, is like, whenever I got laid off, I knew, like, my kids didn't stop eating just because I stopped making money. So that's, there's always a risk involved. I have a question from Adam. So I'm familiar with the aftermath of the Minneapolis Teamster strike and how it led to the unionizing of Minneapolis and the transformation of the Teamsters, but I'm less familiar with Toledo. What kind of impact were revolutionaries able to have in Toledo after the Autolite strike?
That is a really good question. Of course, we know about Minneapolis because Farrell Dobbs not only wrote the book Teamster Rebellion, but he followed it up with 3 other volumes on that question. In Toledo, very, very little is written after that, and that's one thing I wanted to do, is show you some books that you might be interested in. The Toledo Autolite strike and the Seattle and the San Francisco waterfront strike, the California waterfront strike. Both of those, there's a dearth of information on those strikes. The Minneapolis strikes have been documented in Revolutionary Teamster, an older book which you should get, by Brian Palmer, an older book written at the time by Charles Walker, American City, and of course the Teamster series by Farrell Dobbs, which if you don't have, get it. However, the Toledo waterfront strike, I was looking in my library, I came up with two books in which it's mentioned in chapters, American Labor Struggles by Yellen, which you should pick up, and this I got, I'm not even sure it's in print anymore, an autobiography of Harry Bridges, who was a longtime leader of the International Longshore Workers Union and was a participant in the strike. The Toledo strike, and I looked around, I came up with quite a bit of information on it, not only in Labor's Giant Step, but also in this book. This is a very good book, The Automobile Under the Blue Eagle by Sidney Fine, which the Blue Eagle was the symbol of the NRA, the National Industrial Recovery Act. But there's very, very little on exactly what happened to the Revolutionary Socialists. I know that they built, the chapter of the American Workers' Party entered into a fusion with the Communist League of America to form the Workers' Party of the United States, and eventually went into the Socialist Party when the Revolutionary Socialists and Trotskyist movement went into the Socialist Party and came out, and they had a branch of the Socialist Workers' Party in Toledo. I don't think it lasted very long. It may have lasted through the 40s into the early 50s, but I don't think it lasted very much longer than that. But like I said, there's really a dearth of information. Maybe sometime somebody wants to do some research and write the definitive book on the Toledo Autolite strike. It certainly needs it.
We have a question from Stephen. Do you feel that it is possible that the economic crisis will force the capitalist economy to collapse? And what will be the response of workers?
It's funny that last week or so we were having a discussion, and I said I can see this present crisis turning into a revolutionary situation. But just because I can foresee one doesn't mean that it's going to happen. I don't have my crystal ball with me, and I haven't had one since I think '74. So it's difficult to say. But however, not too maybe a few days after that, Bloomberg News came out with an article that said this situation could lead to a labor upsurge, and I thought, well, geez, if the capitalist press it's starting to talk about that, I mean, it's a possibility. But will it happen? There's no saying. And what will the response of the workers be? Well, if it's anything like what the response of the workers is right now, I can't foresee the workers sitting on their hands.